me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh, man, let's get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh, shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh, my goodness, I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh, my goodness, what's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Trees. I'm taking on three of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh, my goodness, behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't got to look. It's falling. Oh, my goodness, this guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media again. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
I mix what I like. Oh, what's up, world? Welcome back to I Mix What I Like right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. I hope all is at least relatively well. Come on in, hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. Do all of those things. What's up, good people? Yes. Well, depending actually on you, I don't need to take up too much of your time, but I did watch these two movies and thought, especially since I'd actually been asked a number of times about it, that I would come on here and talk a little bit about it, about them. So, spoiler alert, all those, just of course, that's to be understood. But come on in, put this in your socials. Good morning. Peace. Dos dedos, chitty matcha. Who is the magical Latina? So we'll get to that. We'll come back to that. But yeah, we'll come back to that. Buenos dias. Right on. Yeah. Semester's about over. About to submit the grades and wrap this thing up officially. But yeah, so I caught up with these movies. Right on. We do all need to be Vernon philosophers, and I'll make sure the link to the Vernon philosophy is, but essentially, good segue. The Vernon philosophy, named after a friend of mine, used to deliver pizzas with or work at the pizzeria with. And just the argument around not wanting to see ourselves in mainstream commercial media. And given the context we're in and the media, and the role media are meant to play, no oppressed people should look to see themselves in these products. And I would encourage, given the context of these two films, that Indigenous people, feminists of all form, well, except for the one represented in the film, I guess, should not expect to see anything but a twisted version of what the films claim to represent. So that's right. Shout out to Vern. He's BPM famous. That's right. And that's about all the fame I think my man would ever want. All the real geniuses stay away from cameras. So yeah, I'll start with the Killers of the Flower Moon. To Spider-Man 7285's point, well made, but focused too much on the white killers and tried to humanize them as well. Surprise. So I'll go through my notes here quickly, and then I'll jump back in the chat and see what you all think, and we can take one film at a time here. Although there is, I think, an overall paralleling theme. I've talked about it in terms of Christopher Mott's Woke Imperium, or my version of that. But again, the Vernon philosophy similarly argues that that the symbolic references in this case to a concern over indigenous people's history, the Osage people, which I didn't even know was a twisted form of what the French called them. It's not even their true name, but that the Osage Nation is supposed to be the focus, and these killings that took place in the 1920s that are meant to take the head rights, as they're called, for the land away from them and transfer them over to their white benefactors. That all of this, and Scorsese has given interviews, the Martin Scorsese, who directed it, suggesting that this was one of his concerns. And as I've learned through no true deep dive, no Renee level of research that I've put into this, but just watching the film and reading and watching a few reviews, it was clear that there was a claim that this film was meant to pay respect and homage in a way that previous films and histories wouldn't have, and in a way that Scorsese claimed that the original book did not, which is interesting, because, and I'll just bring it up now, and I haven't read the book, but in even just looking at the title of the book, the full title of the book, which was the basis of the film, it says a lot. And then the way the film ends, what Scorsese did here is kind of slick. So the full title of the book is Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI by David Grann. And the birth of the FBI. So what I've come to learn about the book is that it centers Tom White's character, the FBI's character, the lead investigator from the FBI who cracks the case, and is not only does more than the film does to tell the history and the origins of the Osage Nation and how they ended up in the part of the country where they ended up in the film, but it also is a depiction of the rise of the FBI, the history of the FBI. So in the film, Hoover is only mentioned once and then referenced at the end. But in the book, he's a much more central figure, the history of the FBI, and they're credited, and it's sort of meant to say, like, here's how they evolved their tactics and their skills and how they became this sort of heroic agency. Scorsese claims he's going to recenter the Osage and not Tom White's character, who is played by the same actor that plays the FBI role in Judas and the Black Messiah. But unlike in Judas, he's less the center in this film by design, which Scorsese can then use to symbolically and sort of in some way insulate himself, or attempt to insulate himself from criticism because of what he doesn't do in the film regarding the claim to center the Osage. But instead of actually centering the Osage, instead of actually giving us their view of all of this, he takes two characters that apparently in the book are lesser figures. The Hale character, played by De Niro, and his nephew, played by DiCaprio. And then so instead of centering the FBI, he centers the two white murderous thieves. And gives us, as I sort of started to joke to myself, a cautionary tale about integration, making a sad, inappropriate joke. because so much of the film centers around this method where white men taking advantage of what I'll come to in a second is the actual issue here around political versus economic power, by the way, and marry into the Osage Nation so that they can then take away the head rights, as they're called, or the rights to the land, which the Osage had negotiated after oil was found on the land they had been moved to after they had been initially removed from their initial homeland. So the film leaves that history out for the most part. So it leaves out the history of the Osage being betrayed by Thomas Jefferson, being forcibly removed. It leaves out the histories of how, as we see in the film, they became Christians and Catholics, how we get to hear of them referenced as Molly and Anna instead of their original names. That history is left out. So my note here is that integration is bad, and Scorsese is telling us that integration is genocide and a ploy of colonization. he's surreptitiously, inadvertently. But that is exactly what the film is depicting, because what the Osage end up having to deal with is that, much like, as I think is a lesser or slow motion version that Black capitalism is encouraging to this day, that the Osage are told, hey, we found oil on your land, you're now rich. They're said, as we're told at the beginning of the film, the richest population maybe in the history of the world, certainly the richest population on the planet per capita at the time, because this oil was found on their land, which was by accident because they had been removed from land that they thought, that the whites thought was more valuable, and sent to where they thought was just going to be this wasteland of rocks. And then they find this oil. The Osage become rich, but then they're told, because, well, okay, yeah, you're now rich and you're going to get all this money from the oil, but it's the whites who are put in positions of guardianship, because they have the political power that says, yes, you have this money, but to access it, we're going to handle that for you. And we'll dole it out to you in because you're not responsible. And they create the mythologies, much like today, targeting Black people and others, that you're irresponsible with the money. If we give it to you, you're just gonna, you know. So they create this mythology that you spend irresponsibly and do all this. Of course, when they come to find out, the Osage were no different than anybody else with their spending, and that, of course, spending habits have nothing to do with wealth. So the ploy becomes to marry into the family, and then steal the land and the wealth. So as I noted here, Indigenous people were wealthy but had no political power, no control of public policy, so they had to have their wealth administered by white men. The head rights were administered by white guardians. And then it puts what you see a little bit, I thought was interesting, that you see the trauma of colonization, where you see Indigenous people clear that, on the one hand, this is happening, but on the other hand, feeling powerless about what to do about it. And even as Molly, the woman DiCaprio ends up marrying, notes and says, look, he's a coyote, he's here to steal my money, but yet she still is compelled. They tell us she falls in love with him, but is compelled to engage in this marriage relationship with him, and ends up trusting him to her detriment, and so on. I thought the film did, again, because even though they don't center or tell the story through the lens, as the book does apparently, of the FBI agent, it still depicts them as largely the good guys. They come in as the saviors. They get to be the heroes when local law enforcement is incapable of responding to the Osage's concerns over all these murders and accident or strange deaths. So as I noted here, they attempt to avoid the white savior, and it's almost told from the FBI perspective. And though it's not quite told from the FBI's perspective, they're still given this heroic status. And then at the end of the film, we get which I thought was kind of cool to see, admittedly, the old style radio plays that are theatrically performed. But what we're not really told appropriately is that it's not clarified unless you're really paying attention. One, it's sponsored by Lucky Strike. So again, advertising is always the dominant factor in commercial media, but that the play was itself called into fruition by J. Edgar Hoover himself as a way to propagandize the rise of and success of the FBI, or what would become the FBI. So again, Scorsese can play this funny game of saying he wants to honor the Osage, but what you're really doing is honoring the rise of the FBI, who belatedly come in and catch two people who get life sentences that become not life sentences because they're white men with connections and who are at the end of the day accused of killing indigenous people, which is, who cares, right? So both of they and the overall nightmare and genocide is backgrounded and ignored, and this becomes sort of and as that theater piece becomes like early propaganda. That was the note I made here, that radio theater piece by Hoover and the FBI, because what the film, it mentions but can't clarify, because it is focused on Hale and his nephew. Hundreds were said to be killed just in this one case. That is, hundreds of Osage were just in this incident of this specific theft of land. Hundreds were said to be killed, including children. And in fact, the problem was, as I've come to learn, that they said there were too many whites involved. So Hale becomes the representative both in real life when he's criminally charged, and then symbolically, he becomes the symbol for all that is actually done. I think 24 deaths were attributed to him out of the hundreds. So you see a little bit in the film depicting the randomness of it and others being involved. But again, just like in real life, Hale is the one that's targeted because they were like, look, it's too many. We can't put all the whites in jail. So what I also thought as I watched was, because of that fact, legacies and traditions of family-involved slaughter and theft are also suppressed. So I was sort of I was jokingly saying we should be more understanding of today's whites. They have whole traditions and legacies of family-involved genocide and slaughter that they have to try to struggle to overcome. It's also why I think underneath so much of the hostility is this idea that they know that and feel like that because they're not involved in that level of overt theft and murder and poisoning and fake fake marriages so that people could claim custody of existing children to get the rights to the land and then kill those children. That's referenced a little bit in the film, but suppressed. But there must be many white families that have this legacy and history that either they know or has been suppressed or has been whispered about. And then it leads to this feeling of, if I'm not doing that, you shouldn't be complaining about what it is I am doing. I made a note also that one last or additional abuse to these people was that it was the Osage who were often connected by Dan Snyder to the Washington football team's former name, and initially dragged in to falsely represent support for that name, and then ignored when they came out to condemn the name. And in one of the videos that I watched, and then I'll wrap up my thoughts on this film here, but I was looking around, obviously, for what Indigenous, or in this case, as he self-refers, what Native thinkers and filmmakers had to say about this film. And I came across this one. I put the link in the show description, but I want to play just this one clip, which was his thoughts on why an Osage in particular, or no Indigenous filmmaker today, would be making a film like this. And I thought this was somewhat of an interesting take, something that parallels what I've heard in terms of Black filmmaking. But just this one quote from Indigenous Insight.
Hey, but guess what? This is just my personal opinion, and I have to ask around to other Native filmmakers. But if you look at the content and films that Indigenous filmmakers are usually making, it isn't period stuff. It's contemporary looks into the lives of Natives now. And I think it's because of the history of Native representation in period pieces. I think that takes away from a lot of Native filmmakers because they don't want to like participate in that in a way. But at the same time, it's like, if you pressure these filmmakers to make these historical pieces, it's like, it's hard. Even me already, like, there's some Native artists out there who want to make their content and make their art, but they automatically feel pressured to be an activist in some sort of way. And you can argue that like we have to be, and others are like, no, I just want to make my art. I don't want to have to be burdened with like every single thing that I have to talk about has to go back to the activism, right? And I feel like a lot of Native filmmakers, they do that in their own way. Reservation Dogs did a lot of that subtly, you know, like with the boarding school episode, right? Again, Bones of Crows by Marie Clements is like one of those very few Native run projects that go into the past and talking about something traumatic in the past. Like, I thought about myself, I'm like, would I go out and make a Navajo long walk movie? Would I be, you know, like, and it goes all the way to the purpose of film and media. Is it meant to be escapist? Is it meant to be cathartic? Is it meant to inform? And of course, in my opinion, especially with recent days of what's happening right now with Israel and Palestine, you get certain content creators who are telling us to stay off the news for your own mental health, right? And it's just like what probably the people in Osage County did back then. Oh, don't worry about the murders. Just, you know, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You know, like don't think too hard on it. And then when you stop caring, or when you stop questioning and interrogating a lot of the injustices that are happening, you become complicit.
So I thought that was pretty interesting, and one of the things I couldn't help but think when I watched that was, this is again the trick bag of colonization, because on the one hand, the colonial experience not only does this to people, but then the actual act of the genocide, but then leaves this conundrum of, do we attempt to tell that story from our own perspective and go through the traumatic experience of that, with the flaw, not the flaw, but with the contradiction being that if you don't enter the space, you cede it entirely to them. But again, my argument becomes, that's going to happen anyway. So all that can be done at this point would be to condemn the commercial enterprise just out the gate. And disassociate from it, and then stand outside of it and offer up a critique in a space where people can go and learn other perspectives, what's left out, understand what that product is meant to do, and then perhaps see other people's versions of that history as they would want to tell it from their own perspective. So so I think, yeah, that's it. That was all that I really had on that. I just wish, I I was going to say I wish Scorsese would go back to making the period pieces he was more accustomed to making, but or do the complete and honest step of actually centering the people themselves. So, you know, like I did learn that the book goes much more into the traditions and the ceremonies that we see glimpses of in the film. Like, for instance, we see in the film apples being placed on the coffins of indigenous people being buried, but we don't learn, as the book apparently goes into, that this is meant to give food. It's meant to give sustenance for the 3-day long, and I thought that was interesting too. That this 3-day but this 3-day long trip it would take to get to heaven, to their version of heaven. But we don't get any of that discussion. We get little glimpses that are meant to be. But even in the, but what I did like, and had it been done from the perspective of the indigenous, it would have been even more powerful. But what I did actually like were the scenes that even where the elders are talking about the loss of their traditions, and talking in scenes about the tradition of even being willing to kill those they knew were guilty of committing these crimes. They're doing it with De Niro's William Hale character in there, because as is apparently true in real life, Hale had engraced him. Not what's the word? What's the word I'm looking for? Had ingratiated himself, or that's also not what I'm thinking. Ensconced himself. He had become a part of their community and fooled them into thinking he was a friend. So but the trauma of having to talk about the loss of your traditions while this white man is sitting in there falsely befriending you, and on some level people knowing that this is happening but being compelled or out of fear not able to stop it from happening, was pretty deep. So, but ultimately, I think the film does immersed. Thank you. That's the word. Goodness gracious. And yeah, so again, as is the case most often when I talk about films, I'm not. Yes, this is not my area of expertise, but the acting seemed great. The cinematography seemed great. It's always nice to see different people from different backgrounds in roles, even if it's stereotypically playing themselves to some level. But for instance, apparently more in the book, by the way, speaking of people playing themselves, one of the indigenous, you see him doing the investigative role, but we don't get, it's not clarified that this one of the indigenous folks in the film is an FBI undercover, or a Bureau of Investigation undercover, and part of Hoover's expanding undercover operations. And it would have been great to see that discussed from within the community. But we insinuated, there you go. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. My goodness, Adeem, thank you very much. Right on time. Right, they're all coming out on streaming. That's why I've seen these films now. I'm so late to it, but yeah. But my point is, the better the good acting, the good storytelling, the pacing was probably a little off in the film. It's a little long, and given how long it was, it could have been there's so much more that could have been done in terms of getting into some of the background of the histories here, but the better the film is, and this is my problem, that the increasingly, and this is maybe a good segue even to start talking about this Barbie film, increasingly films are being made with greater degree of sophistication and technologically. There's plenty of talented actors, there's plenty of good-looking people who can read a well-written script and perform a well-written script and convey harmful politics in disastrous ways. And I think these films, both of these, are good examples of that. And then you have this Scorsese, even as he gets older, seeming more like the innocent old man on these interviews, talking about what his concern for the history of the Osage, but you still told this very white male centered story that glorifies the FBI, doesn't tell the indigenous people's story from their perspective or appropriately, and ends as Hoover would have wanted, with the radio theater that Hoover literally called into being to promote the FBI being performed at the end of the film. And then we get this Barbie thing, and I apparently a lot went into not just the marketing, as I'll come back to in a little bit, but the set design, no CGI, all made to be this beautiful, very forgot the name of whoever was doing it, but apparently they should win all these awards because it's this meticulously detailed, beautifully designed, and it looks beautiful. The colors pop, all the people are beautiful, it's wonderful, et cetera, and so forth. I did see one interview where the whoever was in charge for the studio, the marketing for the studio, was asked, well, the marketing budget was reported to be about 100 to 150 million, and we've heard that you exceeded that. Could you talk about that? And he said, no, I won't talk about that. And then they just talked a little bit about the product ties and the placement and the dispersal of the Barbie message, the Barbie image, and the promotional campaign merch that got everybody into the theater when it came out. So, but my initial thoughts, as I wrote here, are so after all the struggles of women in the world, it takes a grown woman struggling with her life in 2023 to create a disturbance in the Barbie matrix strong enough to bring Barbie to this world, alerting her to all that she has not in fact fixed, only so that we can end up having this woman, magical Latina, a new world and life for Barbie. And all I kept hearing for months is not around here, of course, is how progressive the film is and how well it's made, and it does this and it's feminist that and this and that and that and this. And I'm looking at this thing and almost it's almost like the anti-Vernon. I mean, it's like the antithesis to the Vernon philosophy. The Vernon philosophy isn't meant to say, I don't want to see black films with black people in it so that we can get films that decenter or exclude black people entirely and then have other so-called minorities, in this case Latinas, perform that traditional magical Negro role. That wasn't the point. I mean, at one point, Barbie literally she's saying, you did this. And then shout out to my man, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, who put me onto this years ago regarding the character of Michael in Good Times, which I initially missed and of course grew up missing this point. But the most overt political critique of capitalism in this film, Barbie, is voiced by the daughter, assuring radical analyses and ultimately succeeding behavior can be depicted as immature. And as Dr. Burrows pointed out, if you remember in Good Times, at least in the initial years, and this was done by design, by design, the discussion of the extant civil rights struggle was voiced in the youngest character, in Michael, the youngest son, the youngest child, so that it could be depicted as immature, could be depicted as something that doesn't understand the true, real political world. And they do the same thing in this film. It's the daughter that, and then of course, going back to the discussion we were having recently about the depiction of multiraciality, the inclusion of her white father is done with such silliness and dismissiveness. Almost as if to say this is to be seen as the new norm without any raising of an eyebrow. I mean, and then, of course, one of the few black faces we see in there, in addition to now I can't remember her name. You all know her name. What's her name? Lisa Ray. That's not Lisa Ray. Issa Rae. Is the brother who is I can't help but notice this, but it's the brother who, in his most recent endeavors, is portrayed Malcolm X and forthcoming film Bob Marley. Issa Rae, not Lee. Thank you. I know it's terrible. It's terrible. But seriously though, like I can't help but be somewhere there's a better way of making this point, but I think that there's some sort of symbolic warfare happening here to have someone, and this is another reason why I don't like when celebrity associates itself with radical figures and histories, because it starts to confuse things. I think something is going to happen unconsciously to audience members unwittingly, who will see these films and notice that this brother is playing Malcolm, he's playing Bob Marley, and then he's also playing Ken, or a version of Ken. Once that starts to happen, the symbolism or whatever is supposed to be the positives in these depictions of these revolutionary heroes and politics gets lost. Y'all not gonna move on. That's what is gonna be remembered from this. So okay. Right, and then Gloria is her name, and the Gloria has no real character development because she's only there as a magical Latina. So I saw a couple reviews that were critical of this point, but they were themselves in those reviews missing this point. She's not meant to have a character arc. She's there to help Barbie get over. Her character arc is to be depressed in the already unfixed world, and then to have as the solution to that unfixed world be to bring the liberal feminism back to the Barbie world, bring Barbie into the real human world, where she's already seen her fantasy of what she thought she had produced for this world wasn't true. So what is she now going to do? She's going to come to this world and do what? Fix it? Now she's going to fix it because she's going to bring her Barbie feminism here and fix it. So we get no race, no class, no politics, just gender, white woman-centered, affluent white woman-centered gender feminist politics. Just simple base white liberal feminism where women replace men in all aspects of society with no change to that society other than that gendered replacement. So because this takes place, or the reference to El Segundo being where Barbie was, or Mattel is headquartered, I wrote here, I lost my politics in El Segundo. Shout out to hip hop and A Tribe Called Quest. So one other thing I looked at real quick, the CEO of Warner Brothers that is who put out this film is also said to be Di Piazza, or whatever his name is also said to have a connection to AT&T. So one of my favorite websites, theyrule.net, is on its way back And I just noted that because you get a clear Chevy commercial in the Barbie film, among others, but you get at least one clear Chevy commercial where everybody's driving. And so I was thinking, well, what is the connection here? What might be the connection? So just here, I just did a connection between Ford and General Motors, and right there in the middle is AT&T, which I think is interesting because you got the guy from Warner who's not depicted here, but who sits on the board of AT&T, connecting two competing automotive with a nice bank right there in the middle. And I'll sit here all day and just do this. So then you got they go your pharmaceutical connection. You got, I love doing this, Dow Chemical and Cisco Systems. And the reason I like doing this is because to me it's a reminder of the corporate or the legal anonymity given to the ruling elite that allow them to work behind the scenes. Oh, there you go. Nice military industrial complex to shape our environment. And it's not a coincidence that we can find all of these connections. And I think this is why this is, again, one of my favorite websites, Target. And I mean, again, I would just go on and on for days. I mean, I will literally sit here. Look, there go Apple and Bank of America. So, I mean, all of these folks would have an interest in managing the depiction of the world that they're helping that they rule. It's a little bit of a struggle to move this around here, but. And again, it's not that. It's just a matter of, I mean, what do boards of directors do? They help set the tone. They help guide the direction of the company, to give advice, to manage the image of, to expand influence of. So theyrule.net. Theyrule.net was the website I was just looking at. And I used to use it all the time. It went down for a few years. Now it's starting to rebuild itself in its new form. So I was thinking about that again, because by the way, at the end of the film, the Will Ferrell character, the CEO of Mattel, they try to laugh it off as a joke, but of course he retains CEO status. He stays in control. And then he recreates, they allow Barbie Land to go back to Barbie Land. And Barbie to become a human. But remember, the Barbie Land itself was a fiction that was a representation of what or how those dolls are being played with by humans in the real world. And was itself mythologized into thinking it was improving the real world, which it, of course, wasn't, which caused the disturbance in the Matrix that started the film in the first place. And at the end of the day, the same ruling elite remain. Nothing changes. Everything goes back to the way it was. And the only improvement is that Barbie gets to overcome and transform with the help of her Latinas. So that was it. That was all I had for those two films. But I thought I would come through this morning and chop it up with everybody. For about 45 minutes. If there are any comments, questions, queries, conundrums, catechisms, cacophony, calumny, consternation, contemplation, criticism, I'm all here for it. Otherwise, we can move on and get to the rest of the day. what else is happening? Oh, I don't necessarily have to. I didn't have anything else. No, I have not covered the Society of Magical Negroes. I just saw the preview, but I don't think it's. Did it come out already? I don't think it's come out yet. And this is a good question too. I don't know of any. Anyone got any great indigenous books for class analysis? Yeah, this is a good. Yeah, Electronic Intifada live at noon. Yep. Will likely be there. I don't know about this new wrestling movie, Iron Claw. I don't know. I don't know about this. But the preview for that Society of Magical Negroes, the in the preview you see it starts off with a funny play on that history, but then it ends with at least in the preview with the young brother falling in love with the white girl. So if the film is to make the point about is to take the history of the magical Negro and reduce it to a romantic comedy trope for an interracial relationship, I'm already biased into thinking this is not going to be helpful for an understanding or an appreciation of that history, the origin of the concept and the construct of the criticism embedded in the magical Negro critique. And worse, it stars one of my favorite actors or comedic actors, David Allen Greer. So his part is probably going to be good and funny, and it's going to make it harder to see the nightmare of the politics. Our History is Our Future by Nick Estes is a great book. Yeah, I've not read that, but I've heard a number of good things about it. So I mean, yeah, that preview looked a mess. Yeah, uh, it's about a biracial. Oh, he's a biracial black man to begin with. Is that okay? Who gets magical powers to help white people, but abandons the mission as he falls in love with his white colleague. Okay. Yeah, I do know of Nick's podcast and a good bit of his politics, at least. But I had not read that book. Thunder in My Soul, a Mohawk Woman Speaks. Okay. Thank you for that suggestion. I hope you review PBS's Gilded Age documentary. It was problematic. Oh boy. A biracial man wrote it? So is he trying to? What does that mean? He's trying to undo Jordan Peele's Advance? Because again, I say it as a joke, but I actually really mean it. That nobody in this world knows white people better than Black Americans, and within that group, none of them know them better than those of us with a white parent, and we don't tell the truth. Like any other bit of history, we're not allowed to tell our truths. So that why is it? Oh boy. But yeah, that's the point though. It's not exactly. It's not entertainment. It's psychological warfare. It really has to be understood like that. Um, yeah, yeah. This is a safe space. Speak your truth. Thank you, Jojo. I mean, obviously, the simple truth is that interracial relationships don't solve the problem. They don't solve the antagonisms between races, classes, ethnicities, religions, wealth redistribution. So it's sort of like how I feel about black business. If you want to engage in it, it's perfectly up to you. Perfectly fine. It's up to you, as long as it's not done with the idea that it is producing some solution, or that it is somehow in advance. And I really don't, and I really should do some work on this, or find work that's been done on this. But I really don't like the way I'm feeling increasingly like what is supposed to represent my experience is being used against the very concept of a quote unquote all black family. So I just feel like that's what's happening. So it's not that I want my experience denied or underrepresented or as anybody else, whatever. But I feel like it's just being increasingly abused, as has historically been the case, to suggest that there's been some advance, or that I am the product of some advanced and elevated experience or relationship. Africans need to find another vehicle outside International Women's Day to recognize our women, deal with domestic violence, medical violence, economic violence. Good point. It's a very good point. I thought swirl babies meant the end of racism. I mean, sorry about that. I remember Ivan Van Sertimer, the late Dr. Ivan Van Sertimer, used to and in fact, I had arranged for him to come to Frostburg State in my undergrad, and happily, willfully accepted the chance to drive him to and from the train station, and get a couple hours in the car with him. And one of the things, I remember him telling the story. I don't remember if I remember him telling it to me in the car. I don't remember if he shared it publicly or both. But that Napoleon's wife at one point had said to him that was her goal for humanity. That part of what she saw with the French conquering of Haiti was the eventual miscegenation of the planet, and that this would reduce this was her way of getting rid of racial tension, have everybody sleep with each other to the point where we're all one amalgam. And that perspective has never sat well with me. Why does, to the extent that these groups exist, why does one have to disappear for there to be, yeah, Van Sertimer, man, dude had a fascinating and horrific, like, he told some horrific tales of his upbringing and his educational experience in Europe. And honestly, that limited time I spent with him, in addition to hearing so many of his lectures and reading so many of his books, was that this was a deeply traumatized man. I felt bad for him, for us, because he was reflecting a trauma most of us experience on some level. But it was oof. People who grow up around white folks are in tune with passive aggressive, highly aggressive microaggressions. Key and Peele definitely navigate how to bridge comedy and activism. I don't know about the activism part. I don't know. I don't know about the activism part. And shout out to the late Dr. Chester Pierce, who could be heard in one of his last interviews at mixwhatilike.org, who coined that microaggression term. Shout out to Dr. Bolden for putting that together. Have any scholars challenged his Before Columbus and the role it plays in Black peoples were the Native Americans? Um, yes, people have challenged it, including, I believe, at one point in passing, Mary Lefkowitz and them. But I never took from his argument that Black people were Native Americans. So I think there has been some unfortunate abuse of his argument. But I like the book, and and it seemed to make sense. I didn't, but maybe I didn't read it with enough of a critical eye. I don't know. But I never got from his argument that Black people were Native Americans. And he wasn't saying that indigenous people. In fact, he in many lectures and present. In fact, maybe the one at Frostburg, he would defend that point by saying, "I'm not saying indigenous people have no autonomous history and culture." He's saying it just dovetails with Africans after a certain point, or going back much earlier than 1492. But it's been a long time since I've engaged in any of that work. So I think a lot of it, I set briefly last year, passing through Paris, and sat with a brother who was basically saying Diop's work needs to be updated, and that to me was as close to blasphemy. But the fact is, I don't know I don't know any of the fields well enough, and certainly haven't kept up with it. So, and I don't read outside of the English language. So, but so hopefully we can get some translations and some updates sent over here. Oh wow, it's that bad? Oh damn. Okay. Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. Please send me the debunks. Talking about proximity to whiteness, Doc, did your mother have you sit through Passover Seders to get that good Zionist propaganda? That's funny. No, in fact, again, I don't know if this is a troll, but the exact opposite. The experience I remember more than anything, I had to go through the experience of realizing that Jews and other people outside of my house supported Israel as much as they did, and supported Zionism as much as they did, and condemned Palestine as much as they did, because again, it wasn't I don't want to misrepresent, it wasn't like a daily conversation, but the mythologies, the histories of my family that I got were that, again, my mother's father and mother, their families had been, as was told to me, tricked by the Zionists to leave Eastern Europe in the 19th century or the 18th century. Well, to leave Eastern Europe in the late 19th century and start to move over to Palestine. And by the early 1910s, I believe, they had already realized this isn't the socialism we were promised. This isn't the sort of freedom we were promised. They were not religious. So one of the stories I remember was that this would have been my great grandfather my great grandfather wanted to take his kids and leave because they went to a circus on the Sabbath. They weren't observant, and the religious Jews condemned them. The stories I got were that my grandmother, my mother's mother, looked like a Palestinian and had an affinity for the Palestinian people and never had problems with them. And that's why they ended up coming to New York and becoming communist labor organizers spied on by Hoover's early FBI. In fact, I just learned not long ago that my grandmother had been organizing with the women, many of whom were killed in that Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. And somewhere I got a cassette of her giving some radio broadcast in the 30s about organizing the tenants in the projects in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, around tenants' rights and rent strikes and stuff like that. So again, I did have a couple of Seders, but they were like anti-religious, non-religious, kind of fake. Like my mother was like, well, I feel like I need to show you what this is. Same way we had a Christmas tree. We would later have Kwanzaa candles. Like she was like, I'm gonna show you all this stuff. It's all nonsense. It's all, in fact, she would say bullshit. It's all bullshit. But I'm gonna show you. And then later we would end up having discussions because we went later in life. She was trying to reconnect with some family. Oh man. And my wife and I went to their house for a Seder. Oh, this was crazy. And we ended up having a discussion about how, speaking of Van Sertima and them, we ended up having a discussion about how the story couldn't have been true because the story of the Exodus and the enslavement of Jews in Egypt was ahistorical, completely without facts, without data to support it, and went into the whole history of so ultimately, if anything, my mother was more open to the criticism and condemned. And I don't mean to talk about her as past tense. She's still here. She's just 90, and the Alzheimer's is just so, you know how that disease works. The person that's left is not the same person. But anyway, so my point, so the point is, no, I got none of the Zionist I got anti-Zionist propaganda. I got communist propaganda. I got labor organizing propaganda. I got Black liberation propaganda. I got all my introduction to the Panthers, Vernon, Malcolm, Kwame Ture, Che Guevara, Fidel, like all of that it was my mother, so like, and the mythology she would tell about my father. So yeah, no, I didn't get any. I got a whole upside down and backwards form. No synagogues, no, it was, and then and then when her brother got snatched up by the FBI in the 50s for organizing unions, part of what they produced in the interrogation was a pamphlet, not a pamphlet, but what do you sign? A petition that his mother, my grandmother, had signed in the 20s while she was in when they had been surveilling her at one point earlier. So I mean, it's yeah, my mom, yeah, she, again, I'm not trying to, I mean, we all got our issues, but she did as good as I think could be done given the circumstance, having to do it by herself and with very little resources. Um, it's like, yeah, it's all the jokes. Like I was like, I'm born to like I used to joke about being born to the only broke Jew, to the like to the one he was not invited to their cookouts. uh, Jared, I'm proud to say that you've inspired to join America's Navy. That's deep. Did you take a birthright trip to Israel? If not too, no, it's not too personal, but no, I didn't. I have no, I mean, it was never, I mean, I understand from the outside looking in what it sounds like when I say these things. And I have the same response when I hear other people similarly situated say it. So I get it. But the reality is I didn't, the way I used to joke it, because it was a very real experience. When one of the first attempts to put a yarmulke on my head, it wouldn't stay on because my afro was too big, and I used to always use it. To me, that was the metaphor for how I experienced growing up. That I wouldn't say I certainly did not have a quintessential Black experience, but I didn't have any kind of Jewish. There was no, my mom is she's proud. She'd be the first one to say, I'm a Jew. I'm a proud Jew. This is what it means to be a Jew and all of that. But it was never, but it was, I didn't have, like, that was her. So, I mean, I get it. Technically, by their rules, by that law or whatever, I am a Jew, but I don't have that. I even had a bar mitzvah, and it was all due respect to Jews. It was a farce. Because I went to one and I saw all the money he got, and I was like, damn. But I forgot about the class situation. I didn't know about class yet. So mine didn't produce anywhere near what that kid got. And I was pissed, and it led to a fight. I remember my mother and I got into a fight because I was like, where's the money? She was like, what money? Wasn't no money. We had it at the interfaith center, wherever, we didn't have it at some fancy spot. I had like rush courses. I had the fake courses where you learn to memorize the Hebrew part. I didn't learn to read it. It's disrespectful, to be honest. It was disrespectful. I almost feel guilty to Jews for that. Like it was I was like, where? I was like, she gave me like a couple dollars. I was like, that's it. It did. It actually led to a big fight. It led to a really big fight. And I oddly remember the date because it's the same day that later. This is crazy that the same date that Biggie would die years later. So he died March 9th, whatever, 1990, whatever. And mine was March 9th, 1985, I think. And I was technically 14 because I did it all late. I was like, it was a rush job. Or I was on my way to being 14. I was well past my 13th birthday. Yeah, I was like, where the cash at? And my mother, it's like, ain't no money. We don't have money. The people that show up don't have money. We didn't like, I had just no concept. I did. That's it. That's the line. I memorized all the scriptures for some snacks. And that's basically what it was, some snacks. A farce mitzvah. Oh, damn. It was. I owe Jews an apology. Like I actually owe the religion an apology for that. But I was only 13 and some change, Yeah, man. Today you are a broke man. That's it. You are a broke man. I think, like with a lot of our stories, if you take certain snapshots and write it up well and get a good actor in there, yeah, you could turn my biopic into a good 90-minute romp. But I think that's probably likely for a lot of us. But that would be a funny. Some of these scenes would be funny. Some of these scenes would be funny. Uh, yeah, some of these scenes would be funny because I mean the overlap, and if you took some poetic license to add some things or to make things that didn't quite happen that way, like the overlap of I still of the Nation of Islam and Nation of Islam, communism, atheism, anti-Zionism, labor activism, civil rights. I mean, it's this wild overlap that is pretty funny. Like wild, like rant, like my mother's flying to Chicago to go to my boot camp graduation, and she ends up on a plane with my brother and all of his FOI crew on their way to Minister Farrakhan's spot. She's on her way to and they met on the plane. They saw each other on the plane, and I mean that's wild. I always think that's a wild. Oh wow. Surveillance capital. AT&T literally sent me a text right now to watch Barbie. Stop playing. Yeah, but I mean, but again, I think if people aren't paying attention, people will walk away from Barbie and will walk away from this other one thinking they saw something progressive. So I did read. So the first time I tried to read Wretched of the Earth was in the ship's armory during Desert Storm, but I couldn't take it. I wasn't ready for it. But I did. It was Malcolm's autobiography and Malcolm's speeches and all those Pathfinder books. That's what I had literally stuffed in my pocket when I was, and then I had read it all. And by the time I got home from Desert Storm, I thought, I mean, and by the time I got out of the Navy, I was like, all right, where the revolution at? I got it. Let's go. And then took my stereotypically overcompensating ass up to Frostburg and was like, I'm here for serious business. Lady Ballers. I don't even know what that is. I'll look into it though. Thanks for the suggestion. Jared, do you have a broadcast breaking down the propaganda of the Barbie movie? No. Well, no, not specifically. Other than what I referenced today in the budget that I didn't even pull up the story, but the budget that the dude said he wouldn't acknowledge going over. But I think it's worth noting. I mean, they spent at least $150 million just to market the film. So that's why I keep saying when people say, well, if you don't like the film, just go make your own. That entirely misses the point. And they work to put the thing everywhere and to create product ties and arrangements. So everywhere you went, there was Barbie, 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 Barbie. The exact same strategy that old boy, the eventual mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, said was the strategy to get Obama elected in 2008. Just put the thing everywhere, and then people will just assume they have to see it or vote for it regardless. And yeah. Is your mom Ashkenazi? Found out my second great grandfather was a crypto Jew that ended up her as a result of the Irish potato famine. He ended marrying the blackest of black women. Yeah, my mother's Ashkenazi, Eastern European, Russian descended. I remember I was very, very young, and I remember it became a crisis point because I remember I probably saw, I don't know, Roots or something, and I was like, did her family, did we do that? And I remember asking, I was like, so what is, I was like, Mom, what is like the background, or that side of the family's background? And she said, she was the first one, like her generation. She was the first ones born here. So I was like, phew, thank God. I was like, at least my whites didn't have nothing to do with directly with this. They were technically in Belarus and elsewhere in the Russian world. My grandfather was from Minsk, and my grandmother's people were from somewhere else in somewhere in Russia. And again, they had been tricked, as they put it, as it was told to me, that was the word, to leave Eastern Europe in the late 1800s, go to Palestine. So they were never there for Israel. So as far as I'm aware, I have no relatives in Israel. I don't know. As far as I'm aware, I have none, or who have ever been there for that. That was another good part. Like, my immediate family left for that and were opposed to that, and I will always be happy and proud of that. And I just remember being confused. I was like, wow. I was like, how odd? I was like, that's odd. So yeah, my mother was born in the Bronx and grew up in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, but her mother is from somewhere. I honestly don't know. I don't know all the details. And but the Soviet part is funny because the only story that my mother told me about the day she married my father, they got married at the Unitarian Church in Northwest DC. The only story she ever told me about that is that as she's walking down the aisle, her mother says angrily to her, in a continuation of a previous argument, something about Stalin. And I don't remember, and my mother doesn't remember at this point either. I never was clear. It was something like, I think my grandmother was pro-Stalin and was mad at the criticisms of Stalin, and had been in an argument with my mother about that. And as she's walking down the aisle with my father, that's what was on her mother's mind. Not that her daughter was finally getting married, because they were a little older. Not that her youngest daughter was her oldest daughter was finally getting married, but that they disagreed on Stalin. And my grandmother apparently was hardcore too. It was like, you can't, like, at one point my mother was going to go see an orchestral performance of whoever was Hitler's favorite composer, some famous composer. I don't know, he's got a bunch of hits apparently. And my grandmother was like, damn that. You're not allowed to like anybody that Hitler liked. Apparently my grandmother was kind of a gangster and a thug, and I've always liked that version. That's what I've always understood about her, that she was a rough, yeah, she was rough. And the only memory I have is that she did not remember, by the time I came into the picture, she was herself in Alzheimer's and didn't remember her daughter, but remembered me. And always bigged me up and brought me, said and shared my love of marmalade. That was our little thing. Wagner, that's probably it. Yeah. And Granny, and apparently it was a vicious argument. Like, I think my mother they were still in New York, and she was going to go to the show somewhere in Manhattan or whatever. And my grandmother was furious. It was like, she was like, there's no. And again, somewhere I showed it once before on one of these lives. One of the only pictures I have left of her is some pictures from the '60s when my grandmother was organizing with the civil rights. It's some stereotypical thing that people like me would, of course, want to show. But she's sitting with her sunglasses on, looking in between two sisters on a bench, looking like she's ready to do something. And I was like, damn. But she was but she was for real though. Apparently, like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory organizing that. Like I said, I got her on tape somewhere talking about rent strikes and yeah, yeah. Marmalade is And I did see that episode where that same story came up on Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Larry David was wrong, and that hardcore Jew was I think right on that point for getting mad at him for that. Like, you can't be listening to this stuff. He said that's what Hitler played on the way to. He had him playing Wagner on the way to the gas chamber. Son, that's why. I mean, son, there's some points you gotta. Yeah, my grandmother was, I mean, from what, again, we got to be honest. I'm just trying to be honest. Like, I've only gotten the highlights and she was rough. Apparently she was not easy to grow up with. Like, they grew up in the Depression and that poverty in New York where everything was like, there was just like not a lot of love, not a lot of hugs. It wasn't like a lot of, I hope how do you feel? My mother was like, I wish, and my grandmother was also anti-therapy. She was heavy on that communist argument that therapy is only a capitalist ploy to make you adjust yourself to the oppression. So I remember years ago, my mother said she told her mother she was going to therapy because of the way she was raised. And her mother was like, how dare you get therapy? First of all, how dare you be critical of the way you were raised? But then if you had problems, you got to figure that out. You can't be going to get therapy. That's a capitalist ploy. I've actually adopted that argument. I'm trying to adjust it in light of being around Black and African-centered psychologists. But that had been my, I think grandma was right. I think grandma was right on that. So, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure there's ways that could be done outside of that. I did some research on the Belarusian Jews after I traced my grandfather's lineage there, talk about hard knock life. Them folks had it rough. Yeah, they did. They had it rough. And that's why I'm not surprised that the only film that I'm aware of depicting any of the armed resistance among Jews against Nazis was the story about them cats from Belarus. That Defiance film. And I claim them too. Oddly, one of them made it to New York. One of them that survived made it to New York and had a life after the Second World War. And if it wasn't, and so, but I claim, I just feel the same way I feel like back in the day, my ancestors were not African kings and queens. They were workers. I feel the same way about the white side. I'm like, they were workers, and what does Hassan Campbell say? I don't co-sign anything else, but that line he's got, some of you, there's house slaves and field slaves. Me, I'm a runaway slave. That's what I feel like is in my blood. And then the workers and runaways on the African side, and then on the white side, the same kind of thing. Like, I claim the Belarusians that said, damn that. We going into the trees, we going into the woods and getting to some guerrilla warfare against these motherfuckers. Like, so I claim them. I don't know, but I claim them. Shout out to them. I thought Defiance was a good film. I think it is actually a good film. But I am biased just that the simple fact that it depicts Jews finally in armed resistance against Nazis. I was like, and that's why I think even with all the talk about Jews running Hollywood, and there is literature that discusses this, Jews don't want to discuss those resistance. Like, it's almost like Jews are happier because it fits the narrative of the heroic America depict Jews as being recalcitrant. Not that everybody was rebellion, whatever, but that all Jews were just accepting of it or docile, and then that not the Russians, but that the Americans did all the liberating. So that's the version everybody's happy to tell. But the reality is, it wasn't that there were maybe not. I don't know to what extent. I've read at least in at least one or no. There's at least I think 2 sources I've read. There's a reference over 100 armed uprisings during the so-called Holocaust, or not so-called, during the Nazi Holocaust. But we don't get those stories, and Defiance is the only one that I'm aware of that tells any of that. And but I did like the film, and it's got, how am I on the messy side of YouTube? This is the cleanest, safest side. Didn't you see? Sister said this is a safe space. Right. They made the TV movie about the ghetto uprising. Okay. I am aware of that. But I mean, grandma had it rough though. I mean, that's a rough life. And I mean, and I remember I remember when I was a kid, and my mother from a very early age was like, you got to iron your own clothes. And I remember complaining about it once, and she went into this whole thing about, she was like, do you know that my mother would iron rich people's clothes and laundry? It was basically the white version of work from can't see in the morning to can't see at night. And she would iron all those, and all you have to do is iron one pair of jeans. I'd be like, wow. Yeah, sometimes, there's some of Hassan's energy I really appreciate, but he gets too much into this conspiracy stuff and into the and I'm not entirely, again, I admit my bias against religion, but his version of Islam is a little, but from can to can't, yeah. So I mean, so she was, but I like that the version of, as I understand it, so she was like, look, damn all this work. We need to unionize. We need to organize. We need to go on strikes. We need to, like, this is whack. No, what is Tantura? Put me on, Noble. I don't know that. I did see The Hateful Eight, but I don't like Tarantino. I think he's a semi-talented fanboy who, just like his career says, worked in a film rental spot and learned some stuff, and couldn't wait to get to use Hollywood so that he could say the word nigger. That's what I think of Quentin Tarantino. So, and I'm sure I've been entertained by some of his movies, maybe even that one. I don't remember it though, but I don't like him. And then when I saw what he did with the Bruce Lee character in that Once Upon a Time in America movie, which I've come to learn was his way of throwing some more racism at Bruce Lee and in defense of the white man in the martial arts world, I was like, nah, man, I'm just not. I don't like him. And then Django, man, come on, man, I can't. Can you talk about your experiences joining in the AAPRP, considering joining? My experiences, it's great. So I admit I like the idea that I get to be in a group, in an organization that Nkrumah and Teray put together. But I really just appreciate being in study, which is primarily what I'm involved in at this point, in the study with the work study circle. It's something I started like 20 years ago, then stopped and came back during the pandemic. And it's just great to read and reread books that are a challenge to me, but in concert with other people, which is really the best way and the only way to study. Has been great. Yeah. So I bet if all of the movies he's ripping off were seen, all of those spaghetti westerns and the kung fu flicks and all that stuff, if I bet those films would. The only thing Tarantino has is the budget and the technology and access to theaters. I was mad. I liked it. Yeah, I get it. I mean, he knows what he's doing. I mean, he knows how to make a movie, but a lot of people know how to make a movie, or others know also how to make movies. But I can't. And then I watched one interview where he was defending, I think it was on Joe Rogan. I saw the clip where he was asked about his depiction of Bruce Lee in that movie. And even when he was asked, I think he was responding when Bruce's daughter was like, I don't think the depiction was accurate. Quentin went into this whole thing where he actually said, and if you don't like it, then fuck off. It's like what I was saying about Draymond. Those are the comments that have always gotten me in trouble. And that hasn't always gone well for me, but those are the comments that in-person spaces get me in trouble. Because then it would be like, well, Quentin, so what you saying? So you saying you get to do whatever you want with somebody's likeness and history, and if their own family raises a question, they can go fuck themselves? Word? Word? Word, Quentin? You got it like that? I might have to take this. I might have to take another L. I might have to see you. Or your bodyguard, probably, right? Because that's how they roll. But like Draymond, I probably would have gotten. Well, whatever Jordan Poole got without it being a sucker punch, I probably would have, because man, I don't like that. I don't like how they act. And that, yeah. Yeah, facts. This is facts. AAPRP work study is unmatched. And if yeah. I actually really like Tarantino's work, but I think Django is a terrible movie. It's been given way too much credit. That movie is garbage. That movie was trash. Absolute trash. Like there should be there should be relegation in everything, not just world football, not just in soccer. There should be relegation in Hollywood. You make a bad enough film, you get relegated to the championship for a couple years. You got to work your way back up before we see you on the big screen again. You should have been able to come back with Once Upon a Time and whatever. After Django, probably after a few other ones, you need to sit down you need to get relegated. Like how you and if you want, I think it's on our channel. I think I put it up on the channel. But years ago at the time, I thought it was a pretty good presentation about Django and the film Lincoln. And how you make a film about Abe Lincoln and the 13th Amendment and don't mention nor even depict Frederick Douglass. It's almost as bad as Ava DuVernay doing Selma without Kwame Ture. I mean, it's like Django was horrible. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We need relegation to B movies. That's what I'm saying. We need like this whole. You just get another big budget to make some more trash. I would rather just repost my presentation. I thought it was a good one. And it'd also be a good reminder of how big I had been. Man, God, yeah, I put on a lot of weight, boy. I had just because at the time I was still bench pressing, and it was like if I felt like if I'm still bench pressing, the size is good, and it would often even feel good. But dang, I really got big, boy. I was big. No wonder my back is all messed up. I had fun doing those. Maybe I should do another one. I did have fun doing those. That was fun. I got a lot of criticism for that though. A lot of people were really hating on me biting somebody else's, but I was like, if it's an obvious parody of something, how is it? But it was like I got a lot of criticism for that too. Now that's funny, sir. Your Jewish and MR experience is the one I know. What's MR? Oh, mixed race is the one I know best. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I missed something. I don't know. We're working on that. I mean, his schedule. It's really around his schedule. Brother Gantz. I really loved his approach. It's bench press proportional to weight. So actually that's not correct. Especially if you think about it in terms of competition. So when there was a brief moment where I was even trying to compete, not professionally, but like at the gyms, or certainly on college campuses, or when I was briefly on the football team. And my weight worked against me, because the goal, it's not just the amount you bench, but it's the amount you bench over your body weight. So I remember I lost one competition at the gym I was at because I had benched the most weight, and it was well over 400 at the time. But I was weighing 260. And somebody was like 150 and benched, I don't know, like 2 something or whatever, and won, something like that. So, right, thank you, mixed race, right. Because Tarantino, the reason Tarantino does this and gets away with it is because he is speaking he is speaking for white people. He lets them have their moment, and then even says it himself in the film. So what do I, dead nigger storage? Does this look like dead nigger storage? And Sam Jackson just stood there collecting his check and his Jerry curl. I couldn't have had no career. I'd have ruined my career too. Oh yeah. I'm still proud of it. My goal was, I read that Dexter Manley, back in the day, he was my favorite football player, and he benched 550 pounds, and I wanted that. And then I destroyed my shoulder on a bicycle accident and worked my way back, and then made it to the football. I didn't play, but I made it to the football team at Frostburg, and in front of the entire team, benched 435. 405, I broke down up on my own. They did break 435 for me, but then down, up, racked after my shoulder, still to this day, never had surgery. But that was the extent. 435 is what I got. That was the highest I got. And at the time I was still about 260, a good 262. Man, damn. Maybe a slightly, if I had gotten down like 245, it'd have been perfect. But I was happy at that 260. I was like, this is monstrous. This felt good. Just one. But that's all you need. Just one. But that was back in the day. I remember I used to warm up with 225. I used to put two 45s on there and warm up reps at 15, 20. And when I thought I was going to play pro football, I was 260, I ran a 4.840, and I benched 225. I want to say 32 times. I think it was 32. Might have been 28. It might have been 34. But it was more than, and I should look it up. Whatever Mike Mamula did that year to get drafted out of Boston College to go to the Eagles, I beat that. And they were praising his 225. No, 4.8 wasn't bad, and that was after an 8-hour shift delivering pizza, running in my pizza uniform at the local high school track with no training. So I thought I was going to the NFL. Hadn't played a lick, but I was like, I'm going to the NFL. I was like, I'm going to the NFL. But nope. But then I stood on the sideline when the Washington football team was scrimmaging. They used to scrimmage at Frostburg. And the coach of our football team had us intermingling with the players and the staff. And that's where the team doctor told me, you're not playing this year. Your shoulder, you don't have range of motion. You can't even put a shirt on. You're not going anywhere. But he said, but if you were on the team, we would cortisone you up and have you on the field next week. I'll never forget that. And I was like, so wait a minute, you're telling me my season's over, but this is in the preseason, so I'm gonna miss the whole season. But if there was a game next week and I was on the professional team, you'd have shot me up and had me on the field. That is crazy. So I was like, imagine what they're going. But I remember standing on the side. I know I've told this before, but I was standing on the sideline and they ran a sweep right at me on the sideline. And I was like, and the numbers didn't matter. I was like, on paper, I'm as fast and as strong as a lot of them. But I wasn't ready for that. I was like, you happy to be injured right now. Because I didn't have my heart wasn't in it. I didn't want it like that. I felt like the levels of anger and hostility that were out there, I wasn't like, I'm not that angry. Not at them. Yeah, I think so. But to be real, it wouldn't have even gotten to that level. I think I'd have got popped one time and been like, you know what? Nah. One for real grown man trying to get a job, trying to feed his family. One real grown man hit, and I'd have probably been like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and just do what I did. I'm gonna go ahead and read them books. I'm gonna go right over there and read them. I'm gonna sit quietly over there and read them books, because it was one thing to be in the gym, and on paper I was doing everything they were doing, but yeah. Oh, you got it. Weight room champion is different. You're right. And in fact, one of the haters on the offensive line, I remember when I won the bench press. The whole team was there. And the defense, because I was going to play defensive line, and the defense they were all like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Defense. He's on he's representing the defense. And I remember this big offensive lineman, I remember him saying, he said, he ain't been hit yet. And all I could say is, we'll see. I was like, you're right. I was like, but I see. I was like, you hating though. I was like, but your bench wasn't that, big man. But he was right. And I never did. I never got out on the field. And I think I was right not to. It worked out. I should have played the other football. I tried. But then I got too big and I wasn't disciplined. And I was nice for a minute, though. I was a nice goalkeeper, too. I was nice for a minute. I was, but when you peak at 13, it's probably not for you. There we go. That's what I did. I tried to do the intellectual heavy lifting. I was like, let me move on to that because my coach stopped me and the other girls on our team from lifting heavy. What team, what sport was that? And nowadays, I look at the way people train nowadays, and my generation had it all wrong. We was all a mess. So I think, like what I see the coaches doing with my youngest and how they encourage training, and it seems much better now. ZZ Lion, thank Dr. Ball. Speaking for myself, the Draymond Green attitude you hate, that's what we look for in ball players. Yeah, I know. You're right. You're right. And thanks for the super chat. No, you're right. What can I say? Oh, right on track and field. Yeah. My youngest just ran, I don't know what it is, one of them relays. But you know what, Manny? When I sit there at these track meets and look at what's being worn, I'm not comfortable. And I'm just not convinced that these children need to be wearing next to nothing to perform their best on the track. I just feel like there's something inappropriate about the outfits that are being worn. I mean, on both genders. It's just too, everything is too, it's just too much. And I was at the track meet the other night, watching my daughter run. She's doing this to prepare for soccer, so I'll just leave it at that. Love her to death. She's doing this to prepare for soccer. But I'm like, what 50-year-old man selected these uniforms? Because this can't be. Thank you. I mean, this it really is. It's not even underwear. It's like lingerie. Yeah, I know. I mean, and it seems like it invites it. Because you got a whole bunch of, well, the mothers are there too, but you got a whole bunch of men and everybody's nasty, but all these adults standing around watching these children in very little clothes. So I'm kind of glad this isn't going to be like I mean, the soccer uniform looks like damn near a burqa after all of that. I mean, these track uniforms are wild. And I was like, really? We can't run fast without that? Like, we can't have, it got to be that tight? Yeah, volleyball too. And the dudes too. This is not just the girls. The dudes too. There's too much. Yeah, I saw some of all of that. Yeah, man. I'm like, man, this is maybe what's up, Renee? Maybe volleyball is worse. I'm like, these nasty. Yeah, I mean, it's I wouldn't have made it in ancient Greece. Probably not. I mean, I'm barely making it here. Dr. Ball, have you heard of this new league, American football? It's on 7-7 unionized and open. Oh, no, I haven't. 7-7, no pads, unionized. I'm assuming it's not tackle then. Is it? I didn't realize this, but I saw for the first time maybe a year ago an organized flag football league that I wish existed when I was a kid. It was like a regular professional, not professional, but like a regular soccer or football league, but it was flag football. And I was like that. And it really confirmed what I've thought for a long time, that it is just as exciting and entertaining and and it affords just as much appreciation for athletic skill as I think real football. But you don't have to worry about being broken up. I would have loved. It is tackle with no pads. Let me find out Renee's an athlete too. Bring the highlights to the Saturday's show, Renee. Oh, that's what's up. DMV, shout out to. Yeah, flag football would be dope. Look at all these revolutionary athletes out here. Go ahead, let me find out. I went to the local African diaspora soccer thing over here last year, or 2 years ago now. At this point, I can't remember when things are, but I could only do it one day. I was like I can't. I was a mess after that, but I played well. I had a good game, but I needed like 2 weeks to recover. I was like, I can't. This don't work. Yeah, no running backs though. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. But there's got to be a way you could. That's what my oldest said. I can't be out here playing these sports like that, messing up my hair. Oh yeah? Man, the diaspora Africans and the Latinos, boy, around here, boy, they play. It's not a joke either. It's not a little pickup game. You think you're just gonna run around here, have a little fun? And don't mess up either. Thankfully, it wasn't me, but somebody that day messed up, just mishandled a pass, and everybody was like, "Oh, crime!" But you can run and flag. Yeah. So that's what we're gonna. So when we have this big BPM conference gathering, we're gonna have a spades tournament. We're gonna have a flag football match and a soccer match, in addition to whatever else happens. We're gonna see. Oh man, oh boy. Uh-oh. I had to sit down my children the other day. I said, my oldest is getting ready to go to college. I said, I can't just send you to college with all this book knowledge and all this self-confidence. You gotta learn how to watch the board. All these non-spades players. Okay, you down for the soccer? All right. What? Shameful. See, that's why we don't have a revolution. Y'all just book smart. What did Diallo say? He's a respectable Negro. He doesn't play cards. But the real one is Go. That's really what we need. Got to play more Go. All right, good people. We're coming up on 2 hours. Let me stop running. This has been a lot of fun. I really do appreciate it. This has been a good time. But I was watching these movies these last couple of days, now that everything is coming out and I don't have to leave the house. And I was like, man, it is slick. It's slick. I don't know about this next generation, these successive generations. Thank you, Sith Lord. Thank you all for coming through. Oh yeah, we're gonna leave with a little Andor special. We do need to do that though. Because check the outro today. It's my new favorite. We do need Ricky. We gotta let's put this Andor thing together because I hate enough on media. That one right there, boy, messed me up. Might be the biggest challenge to the Vernon philosophy, although You know, anyway. All right, good people. Thanks for coming through. Please like, share, subscribe, share all of this. Put this in your socials. Support the Patreon if you can. Put a comment to it if you can. I don't know if he's still with Comedy Hype, but he's still around here.
Put it in the comments.
And I'll catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like. Peace, only if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And I'll catch you next time. Thanks again, everybody.
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago from which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything, 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 everything.